There was a prophet in Israel named Elijah. The people had turned away from God and were worshiping idols under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. So Elijah went to the king and boldly declared, "There will be no rain in the land unless I speak it." Then God told Elijah to hide by a small river called the brook Chariot. While Elijah stayed there, God sent ravens to bring him bread and meat every morning and every evening. Elijah drank from the brook and trusted God to provide. But after a while, the water dried up because there was no rain. Then God told Elijah to travel to a town called Zarephath. There he met a widow gathering sticks. Elijah asked her for water and bread. She replied, "I only have a little flour and oil. I am preparing one last meal for me and my son before we die." Elijah said, "Do not be afraid. Make a small loaf for me first, then make food for yourself. God promises your flour and oil will not run out until rain returns." The widow obeyed, and just as God said, her flour and oil never ran out. But later the widow's son became very sick and died. She cried out to Elijah. Elijah carried the boy to his room, laid him on the bed, and prayed, "Lord, let this child live again." God heard his prayer, and the boy came back to life. Elijah returned him to his mother, and she believed that Elijah was truly a man of God. After many days, God told Elijah to return to King Ahab. Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to a test on Mount Carmel. 2 altars were built. The prophets of Baal called on their God to send fire, but nothing happened. Then Elijah prayed to the Lord, and fire came down from heaven and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water around the altar. The people fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, He is God." Soon after, rain finally returned to the land. But when Queen Jezebel heard what happened, she was furious and threatened Elijah's life. Elijah arose and ran into the wilderness. He sat under a tree and prayed, "Lord, I am tired, let me die." But instead of taking his life, God sent an angel with food and water. The angel said, "Eat, for the journey is too much for you." Strengthened by the food, Elijah traveled to Mount Horeb. There he stayed in a cave. God spoke to him and said, "Go stand on the mountain." A powerful wind came, then an earthquake, then a fire, but God was not in them. Finally, Elijah heard a gentle whisper. In that whisper, God reminded him that he was not alone and still had a purpose. Later, Elijah met a young man named Elisha and placed his mantle, his cloak, on him as a sign that Elisha would be the next prophet. Elisha followed Elijah faithfully. One day as they walked together, Elijah asked, "What do you want before I am taken from you?" Elisha replied, "I want a double portion of your spirit." Elijah said, "If you see me when I am taken, it will be yours." Suddenly a chariot of fire with horses of fire appeared. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw it happen and cried out, but Elijah was gone. His cloak fell to the ground. Elisha picked it up, struck the Jordan River with it, and the waters parted, just as they had for Elijah. Elijah never died. God took him straight to heaven. His life reminds us that God can use one faithful person to change a nation, that God provides in every situation, and that even when we feel alone, God is still near, sometimes in power, sometimes in miracles, and sometimes in a whisper.